Hi, good afternoon. How are we all doing? I hope all of you are enjoying these series, and I hope these sessions are adding some sort of value to whatever you do, irrespective of if you're a student or if you are a folklore and culture studies enthusiast. My name is Abhilash, and I am a student and enthusiast of folklore and culture studies. And welcome to session 11. All right. So, without much ado, let's quickly do a progress check. And for all those of you who are watching this session for the first time, I recommend that you start watching to these sessions or listening to this podcast from session one so that you don't miss out the flow. And I also follow the MA IGNOU curriculum. And right now, so the MA IGNOU curriculum, it has the first year course, it has four sections. The first section is folklore and culture, conceptual perspectives, out of which we have four blocks. We are done with block one and block two. Session 10, we started with block three. And what is block three? Block three is folklore and allied disciplines, the link between folklore and allied disciplines. And in session 10, we covered the link to anthropology and folklore. That's what we covered. And today, in today's session, what do we have? We shall cover the link of folklore and culture studies with gender studies, which is super interesting. We will also unravel some of the important aspects of how patriarchy not only exists in today's day and age, but how it used to exist then, and how slowly, with the intervention of different folklorists, it sort of became balanced. So that's what we will cover. And so, without much ado, give me one moment. All right, so here you go. All right, so like we've already established that today we shall cover the connection between folklore and culture studies and the gender studies. All right, so before us to identify that, let's quickly identify the definition. I'm sure all of us know, but let's try and identify the definition of a gender, the definition of a sex, and how these two are different, and how these influence the overall academic approach of this particular study. So let's get started. So gender studies refers to an identification, or gender refers to an identification of a person as a male or female according to culture specific criteria. All right. And sex and gender differ greatly in the eyes of folklorists, right? So generally it's a misconception, right? Especially if I were to give you an example, let's say if you're filling in a form, right, you'll find gender and sex as interchangeable objects, but this is not how the folklorists look at it, right? So let's understand how their viewpoint or their perspective. Sex refers to the biological and functional features of a man and a woman, while gender is culturally and socially conditions, right? So you understand the difference. So sex is more from the difference of a biological and functional features. On the other hand, gender is the category, it's differentiated basis the cultural and sociological conditions, right? So that's the difference. And this is not biological determined, right? So this denotes a large number of behaviors and roles that is appropriated for the members of one sex, which means that, you know the so therefore what it means is a lot of range of behaviors, right, that differs from a man to woman, and that is appropriated, which in other words is it is associated with a particular member of one gender, right? And that depends on multiple factors. So moving on, these rules are not only seen at home but also within the limits of work, religion, society, performance, and recreation and government as well. So it doesn't just exist to the roles that are performed, in a home, but it expands, or it has an effect on roles outside the home, like, for example, work, religion, society, performance, recreation, and government. According to the study, an individual's behavior, relationships, attitudes are strongly influenced by culture, right? And which is true, isn't it? I mean, if we behave in a particular way, or if we have a particular thought process, it's not necessary that's it's our individual thought process. What I mean is, for us to have an individual opinion about it, there are a lot of influences, right? Influences from where? Influences from the relationships, the attitudes, a culture, right? And all of that. So the possibilities of connections between men and women in both biological and cultural conditions are studied in feminist folklore studies. So the possibilities of connection, or the commonality, is studied in female folklore studies. So these gendered connections are also questioned and attacked, right? So that is the beauty of folklore studies, right? Because not every opinion is appreciated or accepted by all the folklorists, right? And for example, so we have an example here in many cultures, aggression is seen as the act of a female trait rather than a male one. And in today's world as well, right? So men are expected to be aggressive, right? And that is one of the characteristic traits associated, with a male one. But at a ground level, it's not necessarily true. It could differ from person to person, individual to individual as well. And this study of gender in folklore goes back to the study of Margaret Mead in the early 1920s. So it's not just today's study. It has its roots originating from 1920s, who documented gender roles in tribal societies. The Simone de behavior also has explored how women are seen as not men, right? So obviously, the physicality, the roles that each of the gender does are not common, and which is why it's mentioned that women are not seen as men. That's what she's mentioned in her documentation. Carol Gilligan has stated that women have been culturally conditioned to be different, right? Folklore has also studied the communication between people who are seen as homogeneous and one unified whole. Identity and aesthetic expressions is questioned and challenged, right? So Carol Gilligan has a different approach here. She says that folklore has studied the communication between people who are seen as homogeneous. So here they're hinting at a commonality. They mention as homogeneous. Homogeneous would mean everybody, irrespective of the gender, everybody is equal, the behavior is equal, right? Gender has also shaped the methodological considerations in the study of folklore. These studies contend that gender roles are social and artistic forms on their own. So there's an element of an artistic element as well, right? So gender roles are studied as having their own lore. Lore is knowledge, right? Lore and types of internal and external communication. So this means that the way a woman expresses herself in folk life is quite different from that of men, right? And I have an observation here. I mean, like I said, this is just an observation. It, I mean, even if you have a difference of opinion, I would acknowledge that. But I certainly do feel that women are more empathetic in nature, right, as against a man, right? So you would find women a lot of adding a lot of emotions to everything that they do, in terms of good emotions, I mean, right? But that may not be the same in the context of a man, at least not in every situation, right? And that's my observation, and I'm absolutely fine if you have a difference of opinion there, and I acknowledge that, right? One does need to study and recognize how women style their behaviors and function, which is what we're going to cover, in future sections. According to Fox Keller, and Sandra Harding, ethnographic research is a privilege of the male. What is ethnography? We've already identified. It is the scientific study of a pattern of a human being or a human race. So, which means there are numbers and data associated with it, right? And what she's saying, in fact, both of them are saying, Fox Keller and Sandra Harding, that ethnographic research is a privilege of the male, right? So male has always got the advantage of that, right? It is said that in this school of thought that the researcher's gender identity and sexual identity will have an effect on the data collection and field work, right? So if we go back to session 8 where we spoke about different academic approaches, where one of the approaches was, where people, folklorists, started moving from the studios or from the libraries to field work, right? Doing what? Field work, doing researchers would mean to collect data on different elements or different parameters. And what this school of thought says is, so the data that we collect for academic purposes may not be an exact data if not collected appropriately, or especially not if collected not bearing in mind the differences between the gender or the behavior differences between the gender. It has an effect on data collection and fieldwork. That's what it says, this school of thought. This will therefore influence what the researchers choose to record and ask in this field. Hence, the ethnographer needs to be aware of the gender and issue concerns as well. So, whoever is recording it, or in other words, the ethnographer, needs to be aware of the gender and issue concerns. Otherwise, that will have an effect on the data collection, which eventually leads us to an incorrect notion or an incorrect theory, right? So, therefore, one has to avoid generalizations about men and women and realize that actual cultural, racial, and class variations do occur in gender roles and functioning in society, right? So therefore, it's instead of generalizing, right? Like Carol says that it is homogeneous and one unified whole. But this school of thought, what they say is, no, it could be different, and it's important to understand that the variations that occur in gender roles at a ground level, that needs to be recorded, right? So therefore, a generalized approach may not give us a actual fact of the data. That's what it says. And then conscious and unconscious gender biases have pervaded the discipline of folklore studies, right? Now, what's a conscious and unconscious gender bias? Conscious biases where, when you're aware and we are biased, right? For example, in certain aspects, we say physically a man is stronger than women, right? That's how nature has built us, but that's a conscious bias, right? We are aware. An example of an unconscious bias could be, let me give you an example of one of my previous companies. I was working for a e-commerce giant, and there, within departments, or in fact the company as in general, we had a mascot, right? Mascot is like a character. The company uses a character that not in the human form, a cartoon character essentially, which has no gender. The whole idea of creating that mascot was, it is gender neutral. But when in different in different performances, or let's say if there's a function and they would create a t-shirt, for example, they would make the mascot wear a dhoti, or a sardar pagdi, which means what? Unconsciously we're hinting that this mascot is a male, right? And which failed the objective. So and no one did that on purpose, right? And therefore it could be an example of an unconscious bias where we're not aware, or when you're not consciously doing it, but there is a bias, right? So a lot of if you do have any example of an unconscious bias, please do share in the comment box. All right. So that's that. And marginalized groups such as women have always been omitted from studies, and they have been hugely neglected. However, now a few folklorists are trying to solve this issue through their research and publications, right? From the 1970s to the 1990s, Few publications have appeared in folklore studies, and they are quite significant. Folklore now is seen as more flexible rather than having exclusive categories. So there's an element of flexibility which has started instead of a generalized concept, and no, and the error of or the mistake of the women folks being neglected, that has been rectified as well through through a lot of research and publications, especially from the 1970s to 1990s. So this is also because many gender oriented scholarship in related fields such as anthropology and literature has developed. I think that sort of mitigates the differences, or mitigates the range, right? And this has initiated feminist folklore scholarship, leading to interpretation of gender based materials. So that's that. And in 1975, the publication of Women Folklore, a special issue in the Journal of American Folklore, challenged the dichotomies that existed between male and female, public and private, and culture and nature. Right? What is dichotomy? Dichotomy is difference, or the separation between two different things in an opposite manner. For example, in this case, dichotomy could be the differences between male and female, right? The separation between male and female, or the separation between private and public, culture and nature. These are all examples of dichotomy. So in 1975, the publication of Women in Folklore challenged the dichotomies, right? So that existed between male and female, public and private, and culture and nature. So Marta Wiggle, in her 1982 book Spiders and Spinsters. Now, spinsters is an uncommon term. I'm sure most of you would know about it. So it's an opposite of bachelor. Bachelor is for men, and spinster is for women. All right. So Marta Wegel, in her 1982 book Spiders and Spinsters, has also studied the images of women in men's rituals and myths as well. So she has given her perspectives about women in men's rituals and myths. Frank Caro's Women in Folklore, a biographic survey, right, also gives a useful compilation of publications in women's folklore. Several scholars have also paid attention to women as folk performers and practitioners of aesthetic creativity. They describe women as being effective performers and focus on the material created by them, and note that female gender is important for cultural continuity as well. So that is their viewpoint there. Just to summarize, what they feel is, women are effective performers and focus on material created by them, and most important part is female gender is important for cultural continuity. In 1993, the publication of Feminist Theory and Study of Folklore attempted to understand this theory. What does Joanne Radner has to say? Joanne Radner, Feminist Messages, coding in women's folk culture, addresses the coding of women's folk culture. Folklorists in gender studies tend to take the position that the work of women is marginalized in the realm of the male behavior, which is nothing but what it means is, um, the male has a strong presence, right? And the role of women have been marginalized. Marginalized is not given its due importance. That's what, that's an example or meaning of marginalized. So they question how marginality is imposed, it is forced, how patriarchy is enforced. Patriarchy is, a strong sense of men in every society, or everything that that we do. So in fact, in today's day and age, there are a lot of professions where patriarchy is strong enough, not just in India, right? In different parts of the country as well. So although we have evolved as a community, as a race, but patriarchy is still evident in most sections of the society. All right, so this is question of how marginality is imposed, how patriarchy is enforced, the formation of laws, customs, and institutions that leave women sidelined, right? So these feminist contributions have created new ways of addressing folklore. So which means these feminists have a lot of contribution in balancing the viewpoints or balancing the society, right? This has also supplied with new data that has helped to further define feminism, right? So the intervention of these female or this female folklore contributions have sort of helped us with enough supply of new data, which will help us to further define feminism. So that's what we have, or that was the association of folklore and culture studies with gender studies. The previous session was our allied disciplines, which is anthropology, and linked to folklore and culture studies. So I hope you have found this session interesting. And if you do have any feedback and suggestions, please ensure you do share that with me as well. And if you do have any, let's say if you want to conduct a session, right? If you want to share your knowledge with the team members, I'm open with that as well. We can collaborate. Do reach out to me. The comment box is open. The whole idea behind creating this session or creating this channel is we can help each other, we can share the knowledge that we have and grow as a community, right? And there's one recommendation that we have, that if you think these sessions are adding value, I strongly recommend that you subscribe to this channel so that every time a new video gets uploaded, you get an instant notification of that. All right, so with that we come to an end of today's session. I will see you soon next week. And I also realize that we have Holi next week. So wishing all of you a happy Holi in advance. And I hope may the festival of colors uh, make your life colorful. And all of you have a great day and a great Holi ahead as well. Right. So thank you so much. I will see you soon. Bye bye.